Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Tuesday, January 14th, and we're going to talk a lot about Notre Dame's matchup against Ohio State in the national championship game next Monday at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern time. They're going to play Ohio State. We're going to talk about Notre Dame's kind of run to this point, how well they've played. And, just kind of the paths both teams kind of took, the teams they faced. It's nice in this game, Jamie, where there's a couple of common opponents that Ohio State and Notre Dame played. Both teams played Penn State, both teams away from home as well, and both teams played Indiana at home. So there's comparisons there. And we're going to look at the way Ohio State has performed in the playoffs, which is kind of a step above from what everyone has kind of done in college football this year. We're going to take a bunch of questions from the chat as well. Got a good scheme question from Envy Irish as well about zone versus man up front. So that's going to be the show today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. Jamie, we have ton of new subscribers in the last couple of weeks or so. We really appreciate everyone subscribing to the channel, taking in our content. We are on the brink. We're about 800 people away, a little less than 800, about 750 now, of 10K subscribers. It'd be great if we could get to 10K. It'd be great if we get. I don't think it's going to happen. It's a big ask. Great if we get to 10K before the national title game, but before the month of February. Love to get to 10K. There's going to be a lot of content that we are putting out. It's a great time to be a Notre Dame fan, whether it's the playoff run that they're on right now, recruiting, portal, a lot of portal stuff to talk about. And there's going to be a lot of postseason stuff, as obviously the last game of the year is going to be on Monday. So there's going to be a lot of stuff there. Subscribe to our stuff, like our stuff. Hit that notification bell. So whenever it is, we are releasing a video or a podcast. And as always, this show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2024. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, I was watching football this weekend. I took in the Eagles Packers. Saw at the end of that game, Jordan Love rolls right. He throws the ball to the end zone. And you got a player running into the player, but the ball is intercepted before it gets to the and they didn't throw a flag on that, Jamie. I thought that was interesting how that works. Same kind of thing happened in the game yesterday with Harrison Smith. Not turning around, face guarding, contacting the receiver, no flag. Funny thing about that. No flags are called.
The guy from the other side of the field didn't throw the flag?
It's funny. He the guy 30 yards away, he didn't find it in his heart to pull the flag out of his pocket and throw it. That's interesting. I have such a thing with refs, man. I do. I can't get over it. People who follow me on Twitter know that. But I'll try not to bring that up too much. It's just something that bothered me. Let's do a quick question. Let's do a quick scheme question, Jamie, as we get going. Envy Irish asked, not sure I will be able to make the live show, but wanted to ask about the difficulty in playing zone as such a man-heavy team all year. So I think because Texas played a ton of zone against Ohio State in their game, they were able to limit Ohio State's wide receivers for the most part, with Jeremiah Smith especially. Only one catch for 3 yards for him. People are surmising Notre Dame's going to play zone, a lot more zone than they have versus man. How difficult do you think that will be, a transition for Notre Dame to be more of a zone team?
They've done it in games. I think people think that because you're, a more man-heavy team, which Notre Dame is still 60% man.
Yeah.
So that means they're playing 40% zone.
Yeah.
It's not like people think they're playing like 90% man or something. Like that's not what it is.
Yeah.
So it's not like a huge transition to go from, you know, 30% man in one game to 70% zone. Obviously there's stuff that you want to be who you are in a
Right.
lot of circumstances, but you have to adjust to the opponent, and they've done that in games too, where they were like, "Hey, heavy man" in some games, and then they were like, all of a sudden, they didn't like what they were getting in terms of what the other team was doing in terms of like running man beaters and different things against them. They switched to more zone, and then it does. And there's different things too where um, I think too, like when you look at like that's like say PFF tracks and says like this is man.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not man when they probably check it off as man, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of things like obviously this, Greg, as a former DB. There's a lot of stuff that in terms of like especially like matchup zone where it's like zone that turns into man,
Mhm.
right? So if you're running match coverage, that is when you're passing stuff off, there's certain different looks that you look, and that's how honestly how like picks come about, and sometimes too because people think they're getting a certain look, but that's
Yeah.
not what's actually happening. So I don't think it's like a crazy transition. If they were like, so Indiana, which is like heavy zone, it's a much harder transition to be like, hey, we're a zone team and we're transitioning. Now it's like, hey, we got to play a ton of man this game.
Yeah.
That's way harder, because if you don't have the athletes to do it, then you're in trouble, right? And I don't think it'll honestly be like a crazy transition for them. I don't see it being a problem.
Yeah. You made the key point at the end there. It's harder to go the other way because everyone wants to be a man team. Like that's
Yeah,
what you
everybody
want to
does.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just easier that way. It allows you to do different pressures and things of that nature. And so you can, if you're manning 4 with 5, you could send 6, right? And you could man 4 with the wide receivers, send 6, and have a single high safety. Notre Dame does that a lot, right? So it allows them to send more pressure when they want to and feel comfortable doing that. I think the other part of this too is one part of the team that has been injured, but not as injured as the other positions is the secondary, where Schuler and Watts have played the whole way. Rod Hurd's played the whole way. Jordan Clark's played the whole way. Christian Gray started all but one game, so he's got 14 starts under his belt. And Leonard Moore, I think this is his 11th start this year. He's almost played a full regular season, or he's almost started a full regular season worth of games, playing in every game. So it'd be one thing if you were trying to incorporate new players into that secondary. Then it's like the zone has. It's kind of like with the O line, right? Like you're passing off players to other, you're passing off DNs and you're communicating on stunts and things of that nature. DB's kind of the same way, where it's like you're passing off players. You want everyone to be on the same page. Sometimes you have to. You can't really use verbal communication to pass off players because things happen so quickly, and you have to have the trust of your teammates. Notre Dame should have that in the secondary. They're very well coached, right? And we all talk about Mike Mickens. We all talk about Al Golden and how good they are, and in the third year and everything. Like they should be able to run any coverage they want to run comfortably. And I don't have any question about that. Like this isn't a team that has a ton of busts in the secondary. But like you said, like they're going to mix coverages all over the
Oh
place.
yeah, the
You
whole
can
game.
do you can do a coverage where it's like, I think it's cover 6, where one side of the field is man, other side of the field is zone, right? So
Oh yeah.
and that's something I think, like if you have Jeremiah Smith to the field, then zone up the field and man up the boundary, right? And say, Leonard Moore, you got to take Carnell Tate, and you got to deal with him on this down. And we're gonna bracket Jeremiah Smith here, or like that. This is where tendencies come in too. Like they're in a situation where they like to throw X route to Jeremiah Smith. All right, we're gonna put in a defense that kind of takes that away. So there's going to be so many things. I think the key to this game is, and I've seen a lot of chatter about like what Notre Dame has to do. Put an extra man in the box, bracket Jeremiah Smith, double team Jeremiah Smith, like do all these other things. They have to do all of it, right? Like there's the one key to this game is Al Golden being able to get Chip Kelly into the wrong call often enough.
Yeah.
You got to get him in the wrong call. You got to, you got to be watching the game thinking like, man, it just seems like Ohio State ran the wrong play there, or Notre Dame ran the perfect defense for what they were trying to do. Like, that's the thing, man. Like, this game, when you have a disadvantage, and let's be clear, like, Notre Dame has a personnel disadvantage on defense against Ohio State just because of the injuries and things of that nature, right? With Riley Mills being out, with your defensive ends being out, with Ben Morrison being out, like you need these guys in this game.
You need him in these games. Yeah.
Yeah, like you need him in this game, right? That doesn't mean
Think
I
how
can't
big
win.
Ben Morrison was last year.
Right.
I mean,
right.
that doesn't happen they don't shut down Marvin Harrison for most of the game if Ben Morrison isn't playing. It's not happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so it doesn't mean they can't win the game. I'm just saying like that you really need Al Golden to deliver a master class. Like this needs to be his opus in a game of this caliber against this caliber of opponent.
Yeah. And just kind of adding on to that, because I think like one of the things with, the good thing because of those like kind of common opponents, like I had already watched quite a bit of Ohio State before, and obviously you just watch games as whatever. They've been in a lot of big games this year. So, watch quite a bit of it. But like, what they did against Indiana, with a lot of that, like play action, like ball out quick, like, to the flats kind of stuff, taking advantage of them kind of dropping their, their version of a Viper and getting that guy and matched up and doing all that. And that was something that like they did basically the whole game. Once they kind of got a beat on it, they did that the whole game. And Indiana did make an adjustment to that. And that's just not something you don't worry about that with, Al Golden. If they're doing something and hurting Notre Dame, eventually Notre Dame's going to make sure that they can't do that anymore.
Right.
Like that's just something. Then they have to kind of counter. And if they don't counter, then that's how they can get screwed. Right. So there's a lot of that, right? Like it's like, the first half running the ball for Penn State, they did a lot of things where it was like they basically were like 70% success rate running the ball in the first half. It was like 30% in the second half, right? Like, I mean, guys played better. Yes, that's true. But a lot of it was, they made changes to what they were doing, and that helps.
Yeah. And the other nice thing about that is like you can kind of see how the teams played against the opponent, right? So like yards per play allowed, total yards, all those other things with Indiana and Penn State were pretty similar, right? Ohio State didn't perform especially better than Notre Dame against those common opponents. Like I would say like against Indiana, they were slightly better, especially from a game rating standpoint with FEI and what he does with Brian Fremeau. They performed much better, but Notre Dame performed well against Indiana as well. Like none of those were fluky wins on either count, right? Especially against Penn State, where Notre Dame, the game rating they had against Penn State was 1.37, which is basically like anything over 1 on the game rating piece is like you played a really good game.
You pretty much dominated the game.
Yeah. So like 1.37, like you did really well. Ohio State against let's see, Penn State, they were a 1.65. So like 1.65 versus 1.37, like slightly better, but not greatly better, right? Like they didn't completely dominate them where Notre Dame struggled, right? So, but I think their playoff performances are just kind of a step above. Like you play Tennessee, you got a 2.63 game rating, Oregon 2.1, Texas 1.8. Now, you could say, look at that, like 1.8 is obviously you're playing really well. They have performed a little bit worse in every single round so far. And I think there is a case to be made, and maybe it's wishful thinking, right? That they just went on kind of an all-time heater against Tennessee and Oregon. They're kind of coming back to earth a little bit. As you kind of evaluate the game and how you've early looked at Ohio State, do you kind of feel that way? Or, I mean, obviously I think Notre Dame is kind of up against it from a matchup standpoint, just on paper in this game, but is that kind of how you see it? They're kind of coming back to their regular season kind of form through as it's gone on a little bit.
I wouldn't say that. I think I think one of the big things was Texas was the best team that they played,
Yes.
in the thing, like in terms of definitely the best defense, right? So
Yeah.
that I think Penn State was, Penn State was probably the best defense they had played all year, or not even probably. They were the best defense that Ohio State had played all year before that game, and then Texas was there. And if you look at those games, if you're looking for like, hey, being optimistic about how Notre Dame will do in the game, one, just know that obviously Notre Dame has, a top 3 defense in the country. So
yeah,
they're pretty good. And, in games where they played top defenses, which obviously, it's different what they were at Penn State compared to now and whatever, but they scored 21 points. Like, cause they got the scoop and score thing that wasn't an offensive touchdown, right?
Yeah.
In that game. So the offense scored 21 points against Texas. They scored, I can't even remember what the final score was against 20 points against Penn State, right? And now there are things that happened in those games that led to it, and obviously Texas got them to turn the ball over. Like there was things like that. They had things, self-inflicted mistakes like penalties and stuff that really, like when they were like rolling, that's what happened. That Travion Henderson, totally stupid penalties. If you think about it too, I don't know why when you punch a guy in the face, you don't get tossed from the game. And I know like Riley Mills had the thing where, he like it was a much more forceful punch where he punched the guy.
I mean, they had tossed him. I mean, they obviously didn't see the Riley Mills. If they did it, they would. If
they did, I think he would have got thrown out. Yes.
Yeah.
Got thrown. Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. It's funny because I know they don't want to throw a guy out in those situations, but
I think what saved him was open hand. It was.
You're probably right.
It's a big.
You're probably right.
For them anyway.
Yeah. So I think that there's reasons I think that like Notre Dame, I think, can contain them. They're going to score points. Like they're going to score points, but it'll be about like Notre Dame, like creating enough havoc. It'll be like Notre Dame, because obviously I've been diving deep in a lot of stuff too. And the one thing is they're like a pretty average third down team, which I think that's the one. It's like there isn't a lot there, but in the games where they have scored the least amount of points, when they've struggled, they've been bad on third down. And that has been a thing where, and they, if they get into situations where it's like 4th and short, they've been pretty good at getting out on 4th down. Obviously that's a thing, but they're, been like basically like 25% like on third down against like the best defenses they've played. And I think that's kind of a little bit of a reflection of like, Will Howard and what he's, in terms of when it's like an obvious passing situation and he's got to make those throws. Also, their protection isn't great on third down. So that's going to be huge. If like you can get them into, you get some early down havoc, you get some, force a penalty, a holding or something like that against them, get them into situations where they get into third and long, because if you're going to get in those situations, like, obviously Notre Dame, one of the best in the country at third down defense. And they have been really good on third down throughout this, these, 3 games that they've played too. So it hasn't just been like, oh, they dominated guys early in the season. It's who they've been. That is going to be huge in the game for them.
Yeah. Eric Barragon says, first time live viewer, long time podcast listener. Thank you guys for the work you do. Thank you for being here, Eric. I appreciate your viewership and your attendance today. And if anyone out there, you're not in chat, it's your first time, hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. This would be a great day for Notre Dame's D-line to have the game of the season. Because that's the thing about Michigan. So Incognito Jr., Michigan beat the Buckeyes by getting pressure on Howard, rushing 4, dropping 7, shutting down their rushing game. Pressuring Howard is the key to the game. Ohio State's injured on the offensive line. So if there is, I don't want to call them a weakness because I don't think they're like a bad offensive line or anything.
No, they're not bad.
But it's not. They're weaker than they want to be. Basically, they're down starters. They're down really good starters too. Some of their best starters. So Notre Dame's defensive line, like they have to be enormous in this game. Not just from a pass rush standpoint. I'm not even thinking of that. But like in the last game, you talked about it yesterday on Power Hour. The reason that Notre Dame's linebackers had such a tough time is because the O-line was getting to them. The Notre Dame's defensive line was getting reached. They were getting out leveraged. They were getting pushed. The linebackers were not able to, fill their gaps effectively. And that caused them to have, I don't want to say mistakes, but they just had a tough time in getting off blocks and getting into the backfield and getting run stops that way. It just can't happen in this game. Like they got to play a great game, and they have to be ready to play as well as they can. Like Howard Cross, he's hurt. He's playing hurt. He's as hurt as anyone is on this team, and he's going. He's got to have a great game.
He's got to dig. He's got to dig deep, and they need it from him. He's right at the top of the list of guys that I think if he has a great game, then you definitely like Notre Dame's chances to win the game. If he has the same kind, because last year against Ohio State, he had a dominant game. He had a dominant game.
Yeah.
And that was like, everyone kind of talks about the Duke game because he obviously got like sacks, and he did a bunch of stuff in that game. But like the film, that Ohio State film, like he was phenomenal in that game. He was so good. And Mills was also really good. So they really need it from that interior three. And really too, like their tackles, Donovan Jackson moved from left guard to left tackle, right? Because, Josh Simmons is out for the year.
Yeah.
That's like a guy who's like a projected first round pick. Jackson has done pretty well, but he's someone that I think like, he can get got, but Notre Dame's got to, you have to be good enough to get got, you have to be able to do that. And so that's going to be key. Like you're going to have to, all those edges are going to have to play the game of their life, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it really comes down, everyone's got to have, play at a certain level in order to do it, which is what they did against Georgia, right? Which is why, that was such a dominant game.
And by the way, like, I don't want to, like, I think a factor in this too is, in the regular season, right? Like everyone's like, Marcus Freeman said this, and he should say it because it's a good message to send to your team. But one thing that doesn't happen in the regular season for anyone is you play Georgia and then you play like Alabama. That doesn't happen, right? And Notre Dame had to do that, right? And Penn State had 2 extra days. At this point of the year, 2 extra days it's huge. It's huge. And so I think going from Georgia to Penn State like that, with the way they wanted to run the ball, it's no surprise. And like, to me, I can't believe they came back in that game. I like it, in hindsight, right? Like I think as you're going, it's like, well, they have to, right? Like it is what it is. You have to find a way. In hindsight, I can't believe they came back in the game. And we were talking about this on the court, like what a terrible loss that is for Penn State. I haven't, because we're Notre Dame centric, so I think of things through a Notre Dame lens. That's such a terrible loss for Penn State to be up 10-0, and then Notre Dame loses 2 linemen and the quarterback, and then you get outscored 27-14 from that point on, and you get like doubled up in total yards. That is so bad from their perspective. Like, and especially when you got what you got from Abdul Carter. Like, he wasn't healthy, but he played a great game. Like, that's an inexplicable loss to me from a Penn State perspective, that Notre Dame was able to come back on them. And it is actually just, it just kind of goes to show like when we say heart, but like, it's even like, to me, it's like the heart, like heart is not even like a big enough word. Like, it's incredible that they came back to win that game. There's no way they should have won that game, given the way that it all played out. Like, they just could not lose Spindler and Knapp down double digits, and then you come back and win. It's unbelievable. But I think the extra rest, especially for the D line, especially for that front seven, like having 10 or 11 days or whatever you want to call it, is I just think we don't know. Like, I think what we're looking at this in terms of like, this is what the D line looked like in the last game, and therefore that's what it'll look like against Ohio State. I think there's reason to believe it won't be like that. I think I think Howard Cross will be able to give more. I think Gabe Rubio will be able to give more. Like, I think they will, like Adon Schuler, like the first play of the game, the guy misses a tackle in the open field against Nick Singleton. I know Nick Singleton's a good player, but like, that's Adon Schuler does not miss those tackles, right? So I just think there's a reason to believe that they're going to be a better version of what we saw against Penn State up front. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think there's definitely reason to believe too, and I think that one of the other things is that I don't think their tight ends don't block as well, which I think that is.
I mean, Gee Scott is a former wide receiver, like he came in as wide receiver.
He's not a great blocker. He's not. And their other guys are bigger. They're like 6'6", 260. And those guys are decent, but I wouldn't say they're not on the level of Warren and Dinkins. So I don't think that, that's a factor. And certainly, like, I don't think like they have more guys that are have had bigger issues up front there too. So that's part of it. They just have such great skill athletes that it kind of masks a lot of the other stuff. If you like have great calls and some guy who can just like, all you need is a step and then it's gone. Like this to me is like an incredible number, but Will Howard, obviously the guy's having a great career. Like Malik Zaire saying that he's the worst quarterback they had. Like, maybe don't talk about after this guy just like ripping up people the last few weeks or whatever, right? He's been pretty awesome. And overall in the season, like, he's got good numbers. Obviously, he's a big guy who can run too. He's dangerous, like can be a dual threat, not like a total, like not a guy who's going to like escape or anything like that. But if you give him space, he could get downhill and run through it. And they have multiple backs who could just break it. They have receivers who can just like take something and just go. Like they have all of that. Their receivers are better than they were last year, which is crazy because, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, but like their third receiver, Carnell Tate, is better than like Julian Fleming as their third receiver last year. And you would say Jeremiah Smith is as good and probably more explosive than Marvin Harrison Jr., right? So it's like, and obviously Aguka is still a problem, right? So they have all this kind of stuff, and then Kelly does a good job of like scheming stuff up. Howard, over 40% of his passes, like his completions, have been to targets that are deemed wide open. That's insane.
Yeah.
Like that is truly insane. That over 40% guys are wide open. Like, okay, some of that is obviously like you're playing Purdue, you're playing these whatever, and there's some of that, and there's obviously less of that. But go and watch Oregon and the Tennessee games. Guys were pretty open. Jeremiah Smith was pretty open. Like there's a lot of that, right? So obviously you don't see Notre Dame let too many guys get loose. right? They don't, that doesn't happen that much, but these guys are the best at that, and they have the best athletes there, which is why it makes it so hard. And then if you're able to get something where it's like, have success on early downs, like they just, third down maybe doesn't kill them because they don't have to play in as many third downs because they're having success on early downs, right? So, and they can be so explosive at any moment. So, it's easily the biggest challenge that Notre Dame's had all year, but that's obviously it should be, because you're playing, the number one team in F plus, in FEI, SP plus. If they got to be the number one in SP plus, I'm not sure. I never checked.
They are definitely.
Yeah. So you're playing that team. You're in the national championship game. That's who you should be playing, right? So, and obviously, in FEI, like Notre Dame's number 2. Like the teams are.
Yeah,
it's the teams that who are supposed to be there,
right? Like, so in F plus, so that's a combination of FEI and SP plus for everyone. Penn State is number 1, and it's like they are basically, Penn State is further away from number 2, which is Ole Miss, but like the difference between 2 and 10 is smaller than the difference between 1 and 2. So like 2 through 10 is very, like 2 through 6 is very close together, right? So Ole Miss is a 1.97 in F plus, which is like, I don't really want to go into what these numbers actually mean, but like 1.97 is 2, 1.91 is 6, and that's Penn State. Notre Dame is 4. They're essentially tied for 3rd with Oregon.
Yeah.
And Ole Miss was 2 at 1.97. So like, and this is just like where you get these numbers is, so it has nothing to do with wins and losses. It's just simply how you play on a play-to-play basis and a drive-by-drive basis, basically.
Yeah.
So that's
efficiency numbers. Yeah.
Efficiency numbers, right? So it has nothing to do with, and their opponent adjusted, but it's not like a win-loss thing. The point is like Notre Dame is in that like second tier of top teams. Ohio State is clearly number 1. They aren't like 23 Michigan had a higher SP plus or F plus number than them. 22 team did, 21 team. Like, so Ohio State is kind of like has a smaller number. Like in previous years is, I guess what I'm trying to say, they wouldn't be the number 1 team, essentially. But they are kind of clearly by far on a kind of efficiency basis, the best team in college football in 2024. So look, it is what it is. Like Notre Dame has to, you play in the national title game, you're going to play a good team, probably, right? Unless there's an upset. And there was not, and Ohio State beat some really good teams to get here. They beat 10 in FEI or F plus. They beat 5 in F plus, and they beat 3 in F plus, right? The only team that had a better run is Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame beat 8, 9, and 6. So look, like this is, you earned your way here, which is, like a lot of people don't want to believe that, but like when you play really good teams, or when you get to the playoffs and you get to the national title game, you beat a bunch of really good teams, and that's what Notre Dame did. They definitely didn't get the SMUs and the Boise States of the world to get to this point. You want to have the Ohio State has the best ingredients on their team, and you can have the best ingredients on your for your media company with a combination of highlight reels, video, photo, storytelling, whatever it might be. You can get that for your media company with VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Let's have the O-line conversation. Tell me why Notre Dame shouldn't put Jagusaw at left tackle, and if Spindler is healthy, then he goes right guard, and if he can't go, then it's Sam Pendleton at right guard. Tell me why that's not a good idea.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you why, because that would be what I would do. So
Why would you do that? Okay, why would you do that? Obviously there's a number of conversations, but why?
Well, one, I think I guess, okay, the reason to tell you why not to is because Jagusa has come back and practiced at right guard.
Yeah.
This whole time. So you'd say, okay, well, now you're going to go back out to left tackle. It's like, okay, well, now you just got to go and practice it and whatever. At least he's got time to practice. They're going to work on it or whatever. But, that's not what he's been working on this whole time. So you could say, okay, that would be the reason not to do it. Other than that, there really isn't a reason not to do it unless you think that Rocco isn't healthy enough to play at a high level because the other reason would be Tyleek Williams and Ty Hamilton, both ties. Just pick that up.
Yeah.
Both ties. Both ties with the D tackles.
These are the two inside players for Ohio State.
Yeah, and obviously they got other guys who play there too, but they're the two starters. Those guys are studs. They are awesome, and if say Rocco is barely getting by, barely surviving, on that ankle or whatever's bugging him now, if that has happened, that you don't want to be hey, I'm in a bad spot against that, because those guys will absolutely they will not be able to run the ball at all if against those guys if that's the case, right? So and Jagusa probably gives you a better shot to win there, right? So that would be the argument to keep him there. So I should say, but in saying that, obviously Rocco has played the whole year and played well and competed his butt off and is someone that obviously and has played hurt and done it, whatever too. So you would want to give him that chance. Pendleton has come in. He had to come in for Rocco and play in these situations too. Plus, Pendleton, it's not like he didn't start a bunch of games this year.
Started the year. I mean, he started against Texas A&M.
He started against Texas A&M. They got some dudes. He obviously pass pro, you worry with him.
Yeah.
But moving people in the running game, he can do it. He can absolutely do it. But the thing is that Jack Sawyer, JT Tuamalo, it's just what it is at this time of year. You're playing against two guys that are potential first round picks at edge rusher, right? So, who have been great and just dominant in the CFP, these last 3 games, those guys have been at another level. Now, whatever you got to see with Tuamalo's ankle, I'm sure he'll play. If he'll be the same guy, we'll see, right? Because sometimes he came back and played and he was all right, but he wasn't quite the same. And then sometimes too, you don't know if it's just adrenaline and his ankle blew up the next day, and we'll see, right? So we'll see where he's at. Obviously can have an impact, but you don't want to be in situations where, you think you're going to struggle for that guy to be on an island when you have to throw the ball. And you're going to think that with Baker. And Jagusa, obviously he has one start at left tackle in his career. So he's unproven there, obviously. But he was going to be the left tackle.
Yeah, they wanted him to do it.
Right? They wanted him to be the left tackle. And so I think he's better than Baker. He's better than Baker there. That we know. So I think because of that, that's why you would want to do it. Not to say that he won't have an incredibly tough time there as well.
Right.
But I think he's a guy that you would feel you'd have more confidence in him there. And that's also why I think Marcus Freeman was kind of vague about that whole situation because I think that's the way they're going to go. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that that's whatever, but that's what I think that they're going to do.
I mean, you got to go with the talent, in my opinion. I mean, let me ask you, are Tyreek Williams and Ty Hamilton, are they better run defenders than they are pass rush guys?
Yes, they are. They're both decent pass rush. I mean, they can push the pocket for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are way more dominant run defenders.
See, so to me, like with Rocco and Pendleton, like they're better run blockers than they are pass blockers. So like you need to be good in that run game area because those guys are better in the run game, the defensive tackles. Like you got to go with the talent at your left tackle position, right? Like we've said it before. They never have wanted to start Baker. Like you have an option. Jagusaw is there for you. You kind of got to use him. And if something happens and you got to insert Baker, then that's fine. Like to me, Baker is like the Drew Pine of like what happened when Tyler Buckner got healthy, right? At the end of 22, right? They put him Tyler Buckner because that's who they wanted to be the guy, even though Drew Pine had started all year and Buckner had just gotten back. They wanted Tyler Buckner to be their quarterback, so they made him the quarterback, right? And we knew that was going to happen. So, like, I think to me, and I know Pine entered the portal, but they were going to start Buckner. So, like, I think to me, it's kind of the same situation. Like, you just have to go with your guy. You have to go with the talent at that position because, like, JT Tuamau and Jack Sawyer, like, those guys are like the Texas game. Who ruined their whole life? It was one of the defensive ends, like they ruined it for them. And like, you don't want that to happen to your team, right? It just can't be. I don't think you can go down with Baker out there when you have Jagusaw available. I don't think you can do that. And you already have Pendleton, who you decided won the job. Like that was the other thing. Like Knapp was the left tackle because of injury. Pendleton won the job. So it's like if he already did enough to win the job out of camp, you can put him in there at guard and be like, we need one good performance. That's another thing that I think helps in this situation. Like we need one great game. Like
that's what you need. Give us 60 minutes.
Yeah, like Riley Mills, like when he went down, it was not that they can't beat Georgia. It's like they can't go the rest of the way. But now you're to the point where it's like you have 11 days. You have 10 days or whatever it is. We need one great game. And then after this, we're not going to practice for like 2 weeks. You don't have to do anything for 2 weeks. You can just lay in your apartment and just lay on the couch and do whatever you want. We're not doing anything after this. We need one great game from you, from Jagusaw, like from all these guys, right? Like I think that kind of helps. That kind of helps as well. This is a great question from Tyler Borgman. This is something I wanted to bring up too. Who is the best running quarterback Ohio State has played this year? I think it's Nico. Because here's the thing. Gabriel is mobile, but they didn't really run him. They didn't. He's
not a runner.
He did have that longish touchdown against them in Oregon.
But he's not like they don't
run him like that.
He's not a big part of their that's not a huge part of his game.
Yeah.
Like he will sit in the pocket and wait and wait and wait. And when he scrambles, he is looking to throw 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So it's different. Yeah.
I think this is a valid question. It's kind of an open question because like last year, they didn't really face that many mobile guys either.
No, they didn't.
They have not faced a player like this because Nico is mobile, but he's not this. Riley Leonard is different. He is a different cat.
Yeah. I think Tagovailoa was probably like the most
from Maryland.
Talia, not obviously not Tua.
Yeah.
Tua's been gone for a while,
right.
But probably him. Aiden Childs this year at Michigan State. But I just was looking it up because I saw that question and I kind of flagged it too. I was like, yeah, They haven't done it. And listen, everyone knows that. I mean, this isn't just me saying this. This is common sense football. It's much easier to play defense when you don't have to worry
When you don't
about
have
a
to,
quarterback
yep.
running, which was why I would much rather play, and not just because of some of the mistakes he makes too, but like you'd much rather play Quinn Ewers
Yeah.
than even Howard, because Howard, at least he's not going to run all the time, but they will use him and he will scramble and he's much more dangerous. Like he's someone that if you totally ignore him, he'll break off a 30-yard run. Like that's something that'll happen. And obviously you can't ignore Leonard because he will kill you if you do that, right? So, but they haven't had to do that. They haven't had to prepare for any of that. And it does change the way the calls you make, all that kind of stuff, right? So like, just think about even in this Penn State game where you're like, Leonard didn't have like a monster game scrambling, but even just a couple of those scrambles were huge. Or even like, hey, scrambling where he first of all couldn't get the edge into Abdul Carter because Abdul Carter is just too much of a freak. But
those
even
defensive ends aren't like that.
Yeah, most defensive ends aren't like that, and I wouldn't even say
especially Ohio State's. Like
I mean, those guys are good, but they're not that good. They're not like
Leonard is an elite athlete. And that's the point. Like I put it on Twitter. Like no one is keeping him from getting the corner there except Abdul Carter. And that's why he's the #1 pick.
Yeah.
Like Sawyer and JT are like they're good athletes. Leonard is an elite athlete. And like it's just different, right? And that's what I give credit to Landon. Like he said that they should not have Abdul Carter, they should have him spy. And he rushed sometimes, but like in the obvious passing situations, they had him spying on Leonard, and he made the right call there because that was what he did. Again, Riley Leonard, even in that situation, 6 running first downs for Notre Dame. He had the most running first downs in the game. And like that can wreck your whole program. It is preparing for Quinn Ewers is much different than preparing for Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has 13% pressure to sack rate. I think that's what it is on the season. Something like 147 total pressures and like 12 sacks. And I mean, I'll just as a in team comparison, like Steve Angeli's 31%.
Steve Angeli, which is probably, if you're going to look at like, to me, what I look at like the biggest red flag for Steve Angeli possibly winning the job next year is that.
People need to understand like the offensive line has been good given, the situation. This season is not even close to what it is if Riley Leonard is not who he is.
Oh, they are screwed. They are screwed. They would have, if they didn't have a guy like Leonard and his ability to escape, zero chance they make the playoff. All of that. Like it just would have been. I don't even want to think about what it would have looked like. It could have been really bad. Could have been really bad, especially early on when the line was not as good as they are now, even though they've had injuries, whatever. But like they're obviously better now. Like Emil Wagner is a much better player now than he was like in game 2 or whatever. Like it's quite a big difference.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers is a 23% pressure to sack rate, which I don't know what it is nationally, but like 10% difference is like that's huge.
It's bottom stuff. It's like bottom 10 in Power 4. Yeah. And the thing is that when you're playing, if you look at too, and this was the thing too with Aller as well, right? Was that if you look at his pressure to sack rate numbers, you're like, yeah, they're pretty good for the season. But against like better defenses, it was high. So that's something that I think is, and the thing is with Leonard is Texas A&M, Georgia, Penn State, it doesn't matter. He's not getting sacked a lot. Like he's just not. He's just able to, escape enough when he needs to.
Yeah. Tyler Borgman's asking what Will Howard is. Will Howard's 12%. So that's like what you get from these mobile guys. Like Howard is not the runner that that Riley Leonard is, but he's mobile and he can escape pressure. And so it's like but from the he can escape pressure to throw and maybe scramble a little bit. Like Riley Leonard can escape pressure to gash you, right? And we've seen that in games. Just what he's able to do against Georgia.
I think, and I think one of the things is that Howard has gotten better at it because it's like better at like processing things, better at knowing when to run and all that. I think that has been definitely a part of it. But like you can look at early in the season, Nebraska 50% in that game, Penn State 30%, right? Like those were part of the reason why they couldn't score points in those games, right? So, and even if you look at Texas obviously has just straight dudes pass rushing, but 18.2%, that's obviously much higher than his average, right? So, but that is going to be so important for Notre Dame to get him, on the ground. And that's why too, that's also too, where you got to look at like, some of the stuff where it has to happen is like, he's got to know it's like, hey, pressure's coming, but he doesn't know where it's coming from and this and that. And that's where like, Golden comes in and all that too.
Yeah. Just as a comparison. So Will Howard has 27 first down rushes. Riley Leonard has 62.
Yeah. It's a
lot.
Yeah. And then obviously too, you look at like what Leonard,
Leonard leads the team in 10 plus rushes.
Yeah. And
which is crazy.
That is crazy. And also if you look at like in these games that are really, really important, he is the short yardage runner.
Yeah.
Like, he's the primary guy. Obviously Jeremiah Love, not a bad option.
No.
He certainly, running through 5 tackles, not bad.
But Riley Leonard has 2 less 10-plus yard runs than Quinshawn Judkins does. So that's which is all to say, this is different. Like preparing for him is different than it is preparing for anyone else that Ohio State has played. It's not even close, right? And this game has, I've seen a lot of people kind of give like Tim Tebow light energy to Riley Leonard. It's like if we get a Riley, like a A+ Riley Leonard game, it just changes things, right? And I think that this has like big potential for, Pat Coogan used the phrase emptying the clip, right? And just like kind of using everything you have. Like this is a huge, everything that you have in your bag that gets Riley Leonard going, especially against a defense where it's like they're not crazy athletic in the front four. It like maybe Abdul Carter is, or those Georgia guys where it's like Jalen Walker's kind of like a different kind of athlete too. It's like you aren't facing that foe, and Cody Simon and Sonny Styles are good linebackers, but I kind of like Riley Leonard in that situation. Like that is a huge X factor in this game, and again an A+ Riley Leonard performance, be it passing, be it running, could really change things for Ohio State in the way that they want to kind of play defense, in the way and their effectiveness on defense. It's just kind of an unknown on how they're going to handle it.
Yeah. I could easily see, Sonny Styles is a freak athlete. He's freakish, right? Very Isaiah Simmons, you know, very, very similar type of athlete player. Had a monster game against Texas, you know, but he would be the guy that I would expect probably to be, if they're going to spy him, he would be the guy that I think, you know, that they use in that scenario, because one, Simon is such a good blitzer. He's a very good blitzer.
Yeah.
And he has, I think he's got 7.5 sacks this year. So that's like, you know, they don't want to take him away from doing that kind of thing. But yeah, like that is definitely a matchup to watch. Styles versus Leonard.
Yeah. Let me see here. Trying to get down here. See, according to PFF, he has 5 sacks, but they're like, those counting numbers are kind of weird. Like the official stats are what they are, right? And so like I don't PFF isn't really, they don't do that, and they don't do half sacks either. So if you're coming there, Incog Junior says Caleb Downs is always, yeah, like Caleb Downs is a factor there. But like, to me, if Caleb Downs is spending time dealing with Riley Leonard, the runner, then that's
good for Notre Dame.
That's a positive, right? Like
that's
like if he's
a chance that they're going to make plays down better chance to make plays down the field. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So I think he presents problems that that other teams, or they haven't had to deal with other teams, right? Like definitely not Quinn Ewers. I mean, Nico a little bit, but he's just not that type of runner. And not just that, but he's not physical either. Like there's a physicality to Riley Leonard that is just unlike anything else, right? He's just that kind of guy. Same thing with Dylan Gabriel. What do you think about this matchup between, like, as kind of we close here, what do you think of this matchup between Denbrock and Knowles?
Jim Knowles, incredible defensive coordinator. I would say out of all the hires that you know, Ryan Day has made, that was probably the best one. And I think like it's weird because I know that like Ohio State fans, you know, were kind of like on him because he's not a guy. He's similar to Al Golden. He's not like, you don't hear his name as a recruiter very often. He's a coordinator, right? Like he's a guy that's his priority, right? But I mean, how can you argue with the results? Like the guy is awesome. He does a great job attacking protections with his blitz packages are awesome. I think they've obviously, as you've seen too, where that first year, they are far better in year 3 than they are in, you know, year 1 of that defense. And they've had basically their whole defense with except for Caleb Downs, all of their starters are draft eligible guys who have a good shot of getting drafted. You know, like it's probably got 10 guys. So they got 11 starters that are NFL guys. So that helps, obviously. But you saw what he did with like Oklahoma State, where they didn't have a bunch of dudes who were NFL guys. So the guy can coach. He's great. He does a tremendous job of like, obviously he has dudes up front that can do it. And he knows that he's capable of just rushing 4 and having success. But he knows that he can, like, I think you're going to have a lot of 5-man pressure against Notre Dame. And that's going to be the thing where you're going to have a lot of answers versus the blitz, but they'll do a lot of like, you know, like zone dog stuff too, right? Where they drop guys out and all that. And then Tuiamalo and Sawyer can drop and like cover decent too, right? Like they're not like guys you want like running on a wheel route with Jeremiah Love, but they can move. And also too, they both have like crazy hand high. So the deny Dennis Sutton pick, those are plays that they can make too, right? So it just makes it so difficult to deal with because they have all these chess pieces that he can kind of move around the board. And he is so good with using his safeties to help, stop the run too. So this is just one of those games where it's like Denbrock, I think, I was blown away. I thought he did a fantastic job, specifically, obviously, second half, just really, and not just second half, from the field goal first, the 2-minute drill drive to all the way through the second half.
Mm-hmm.
He was on it. He was on one. He was just absolutely he was dialed in. He was much better than Tom Allen from that point on in the game. And even though he had disadvantages because of his line. And I think that's what Denbrock has been so good at is like, hey, I have this kind of thing. What we like to do. And then he finds a way to kind of like counter it and find that. So he's got to like basically have all of that in this game, where it's got to be more than, like the Louisville game, where it's like they had the one drive. It's like, man, they haven't done anything like basically the whole second half. Well, we're going to run that Jaden Harrison, the fake screen where he leaks out. And then we're going to run the screen to Jeremiah Love that looks like, they're running
that we've been setting up all game.
Yeah. So he's going to have to do that kind of stuff throughout the game. Like that is going to have to happen and obviously you have to run the ball. Like you can't just say like, hey, we're not having success, so we got to stop. They have to keep running the ball, even if they're not having a ton of success. That is going to be important because when it comes to the end of the game, they're going to have to do that. But I really think there's going to have to be stuff like what he did against Georgia, where it's like jet to Faison gets a 6 yards here, right? We're sneaking in this, end around to Jane Thomas there on the short yardage in the Penn State game. All that kind of stuff. Like maybe quarterback runs that you haven't seen all year that you're going to run in this game, right? Where that you had been saving that stuff all the time. That's what it's for. It's emptying the playbook and you do it. And obviously, if they're kicking your butt up front, sometimes you might have something that you think is a great call. It doesn't matter. So they got to be like even with them up front. But I have a feeling that Denbrock will have like he'll have some answers to move the ball enough, and it'll be about like executing when they get into like Ohio State territory and kind of where they're at there.
Yeah. And one last thing before we go. And everyone keep in mind, like we are talking about the number one defense in F+. So when we say Notre Dame has to take advantage of something, it's not like the easiest thing in the world. Okay. They're very good on defense.
Yes.
These corners.
That is the weakest part of their,
Bo Collins and Jordan Faison. If there was ever a time, right? And it becomes, with Bo Collins, like, how healthy are you really? Like, to me, you have a calf injury that you left in after the first series and didn't return. To me, it's kind of like you're just going to be okay. Like 11 games later, I don't. That remains to be seen. But Davison Igbenusin, 14 penalties on him.
They went at him last year.
Another 14 penalties, another three declined. So, we feel like Christian Gray gets called for 11. He has 6.
He is a serial grabber.
Yeah.
He is absolutely. Everyone has. So if you look at, and we like to always say like, oh, ball production, how many pass breakups a guy has, how many interceptions. He made a great interception against Penn State in their game.
Yes, he did.
Like
in the end zone.
Yeah. But They were going at him before that.
He made a great interception against Penn State. The receiver kind of dropped the ball into his lap. So that's something that happened.
There's zero chance that they don't go at him many times in this game. And also, too, like, Stephen Cholkowski mentions Mitch Evans. That's like Mitch Evans. They're going to line him up and be kind of what they did in this. And they're like, hey, especially, too, if you don't think you're going to get Collins, well, somebody's got to win back shoulder. Someone's got to do and that's kind of like what you're going to have to do in these games. This might even be like, hey, Eli Raridan, where you're going to do a little bit more of that. Put it this way, Rico Flores was the guy that they were using for that this year. So, I mean, Faison will be on him. I think that is something, 100% something to watch. The other thing is that, what's his face? The other corner, Denzel Burke.
Yeah.
Hurt missed the second half of the Texas game.
Yeah.
So upper body injury, whatever the upper body injury, who knows? But put it this way, people thought he was getting benched because he hasn't really played that good this year. And he wasn't
31 of 40 against 78% completions, 103.5 NFL passer rating against, which is
he's not having a good. He had a really good year last year. He is not having the same year this year.
Yeah,
he has struggled. And Jermaine Matthews is the other guy who primarily plays, and then they have Lorenzo Styles. Jermaine Matthews, and Lorenzo Styles Jr. is the other guy. And whatever. Obviously, we know that Lorenzo Styles Jr. is a really good athlete, but if he's in the game, heck yeah, you got to go at him. Okay. You have to do all these. So that is where one of the things with Penn State, which was that is what they had given up big plays in the passing game. That was their one thing. And it was Notre Dame doesn't get any. So it's they're going to get any. But that's the thing. Notre Dame, when they play the teams that they give them something, they've been able to exploit it all year. I mean, you don't go 14-1 and have your success on offense if you aren't just getting those, plays, right? Yeah. So it's going to be huge. That is going to be huge. Those matchups there. Lathan Ransom and Downs, the best safety duo in the country. I think it's pretty fair to say that. They are awesome, both awesome.
Yes, yeah.
I think their nickel, Jordan Hancock, he's a pretty good player. But also the fact that you had Jaden Greathouse just have the game that he had, you got to throw the ball to him in this game. So that's going to be a matchup where you're win this week, right? And all that kind of stuff. That's going to be huge because there's going to be, I think, for large chunks of the game where Notre Dame doesn't run the ball well.
Oh, and yeah.
That is going to happen. So I think about there's the play where first play of that series, 4-yard loss. They blitz their nickel, blow up Notre Dame's running, I think, counter tray. It gets blown up in the backfield, 4-yard loss, 2nd and 14. Next play, Penn State is playing it like they're getting pass. Notre Dame runs it. Price gets a 11 or 12-yard game. Can't remember exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was they had the numbers there. And it wasn't a bad run from Price. It was it was good. But that's the kind of thing where you're going to need Price or Love to hey, that 11, make it 40, make it 60. You're going to need that.
Yeah. I would push back a little bit. Caleb Downs Downs and Ransom are good. Watson, Schuler, pretty good. I mean,
I'm not saying that they're whatever, but I think Watts is to me, we watched him all year. You've seen him grow. Whatever. Xavier Watts is the best safety in the country, and I frankly, I actually don't even think it's close.
Right.
Just my opinion.
Well, look, he's playing how he's playing, right?
Yes, just my opinion.
Evaluate the play. Caleb Downs. Listen,
I would say I'm just saying the combination of the two. Obviously, Schuler, fantastic player, great, but like last game, didn't have his strongest game.
Right.
He's had a few of those games.
Yeah.
Where Ransom has.
And look, Ransom's an older player, right? Like
yeah, he's a fifth-year player.
Like, as they get on, I think Adon Schuler will pass him. But yeah, maybe this year you just don't have the downside that we've seen from Adon. It doesn't really matter. Both teams have really good.
You could trade up, and it would be. I think people would be happy either way.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's gonna be. Look, they got to make plays. Got to make plays in this game. We can end it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you like what you heard, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell soon, whatever it is. We are going to go live. I'm going to work on a live show for tomorrow. I'm going to do a live show every day this week. So I'm going to work on that. Check on Twitter for that. Check on irishsportsdaily.com for that. I'm going to come up with a show. We're going to keep the ball rolling on this stuff. So thank you everyone for that. We'll be back hopefully tomorrow with a show. If not, then we'll be back on Thursday. So have a good rest of your day, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.